Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everstage's Go-to-Master Show, Season 3, where we converse with RevOps and go-to-market leaders from some of the most successful companies today and learn from their unique stories. Joining us today is Melissa Ramirez, MBA, Certified Sales Compensation Professional, and she's a Director of Commission Operations at Cox Communications. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. Why don't you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and your role and anything you want to share at this point?
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. Um, I've spent probably over a decade focusing on comp strategy, technology, business operations. Do you want to get into the work we support or more?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. We support just over 3,000 sales employees, give or take. We have a big focus on having accurate, timely, transparent comp processes so that our sales reps trust us, which is what I'm here to talk about.
So 3,000 salespeople, that's a big number.
Yes.
You must have a pretty well-oiled process and team and systems at this point to get those results. So tell us a little bit about how you're set up and how the team works and some of your non-negotiables, some of those things that you really just look after to make sure that you can deliver for this team.
I have a team of 12 direct and indirect reports scattered around all of our markets. I've got employees who focus on the technology aspect, the configuration of the tool itself. I've got employees who focus on frontline operations, interacting with sales leaders, answering policy questions, handling disputes. And then I've got a smaller team that just focuses solely on data and making sure that our data is delivered accurately every single day, and then highlighting when there's any kind of an issue.
Yeah, you have to have that right data from the very beginning, right? Otherwise, nothing else matters. How long have you been in the role?
Um, about 14 years.
Okay. So you've probably seen a lot of change and you've been able to leave your mark along the way in different aspects. So
Yes, I have. I actually started before that in a local market in Arizona where I supported just the Arizona sales folks, and we started to grow. At some point along the way, we decided to consolidate and have more of a strategic overall team. Um, and that's where I jumped in and took this role and supported all markets nationwide. And over that time, we went through different reorganizations. We started with sales reps, operations, and sales comp folks locally in their market, not reporting to me, but kind of dotted line to me. And then we finally changed that structure, which I'll talk about a little bit later in more depth. But we changed the structure so that we're all on the same team, which I think has helped consolidate quite a bit. That probably is the biggest no negotiable because they're not accountable to this team, then you've got kind of mixed messages.
yeah. So I read you've delivered 99.9% first pay accuracy at scale. So that's something to be proud of for sure. And it's really hard to do. I know it's our job, but it's really hard. So kudos on that. So I think emphasis on getting the data right, make sure that happens, consolidation, getting the right team around you are some of the tools that you've just relied on to get there. Anything else of note that you think imagine someone in their career that's sort of on a scaling path that they need to be able to, they maybe have a good system going on, but they're facing scale up. Anything else you think would be helpful for them to know?
Yeah, I kind of looked at it as like a three-legged stool. There's people, process, and then the system. So we talked about the team just being aligned and cohesive, working towards the same goal. That way you have backup in place. You've got support for all sales folks. On the process side, we kind of organized a very strong calendar, documented intake, made sure that everyone understands their role and when things are delivered to us. And then on the system side, of course, data, as I mentioned, and having configuration on this team really assists with making sure that we've got oversight on how the plan rules are calculated, aligned to your use cases, your expected results, and so on. I also have an internal auditor on my team who has made huge help because she looks behind all of the work, all of my frontline processing. She checks and makes sure that we call out any errors, question why we might have done something out of policy or an exception, and make sure that I maintain a small level of exception while really sticking to our policy. And obviously, those exceptions are sometimes warranted. So that's her
That's a
role is to
really
hold me to it.
yeah, yeah, really good idea. And I think a team your size probably merits it. But even for smaller teams, even if you don't have a dedicated, having that lens of the audit as you go through processes and controls, super important. So that's a really cool thing you've done there. We see you've introduced daily commission statements with mobile access as well. How did you build seller trust and reduce any shadow accounting? And what made that system become the actual source of truth over time?
So I truly believe that shadow accounting really comes when people don't trust the system. So there's misunderstandings, there's blind spots, there's not regular deliverables. So what we did was having that on a daily basis right from the start increases trust immediately. You don't have to have mysteries and wait till month end to understand where your performance is headed. Delivering it at the same time every single day, making sure that there's transparency. Things that are in the comp statement are the things that would help a sales rep recalculate their commission. So they can see their quota, which they already know, they've already signed off on it, but they see it there on a daily basis. They see their credits as they're calculating throughout the month. They see them. They see any plan rules or attainability measurements. I'm sorry. For example, if you have 123% to goal, I know what that's going to turn into in my paycheck. So they can see that every single day. Um, we gave reps the ability to see that as a deal closes today, it shows up in tomorrow's report. And they can double click on that first page statement and see all of those transactions. That really helps people stop questioning, where's my number coming from? What prove it? We prove it every day.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you see, I'm sure when you first launched this, adoption must have been massive, everyone trying to jump in and get it. Do you find over time that people now, the trust is established and it's just more whenever a big deal closes, but they're maybe less obsessed about checking it every single day?
Yeah, sure. At first, when we started, everybody was checking. You actually increased the shadow accounting for that first, couple of
Sure.
weeks. They want to fact check, which is
Yeah.
their right. By providing that level of detail, they can do so. And yeah, absolutely. We partnered with the sales leaders. We made sure that training was available. Everyone knows how to read their statement. Everyone knows how to escalate concerns if they have them. And absolutely what we start seeing now over time was people just know and they trust the systems, right? They literally say, "Let me check my commission statement." And that becomes the source of truth as opposed to, "Let me check my tick sheet, my spreadsheet, my whatever planner they used."
Yeah. And I bet keeping plans as simple as possible helps with this as well. There's cases where I've been guilty of this, and sometimes we're forced to introduce a lot more complexity than we would have wanted, and that just makes everything harder. But if you keep things consistent and clear, another great way of reducing anxiety.
Of course, we try to keep, on average 3 or less metrics. They're small, they're the main key performance indicators. Um, and yeah, we keep it simple.
Very nice. So there's this trust that's built out, plan rolls out, there's the year happens, it starts, everything is falling into place. But of course, every time there's a change of plan, new year coming, any few adjustments, there's usually some healthy tension, let's call it, between ideally healthy tension between sales and finance and IT. Uh, it'd be super interesting to learn from you. What habits help you align all those teams and identify friction and then resolve it as needed?
Honestly, you just have to understand that everybody wants something important to them. Sales focus is motivation and fairness. They want to know what we're giving them is easily, well, not easily, I'm sorry, is attainable with the challenge. Finance just wants to be fiscally responsible and make sure that we can predict those goals and those payouts. And then, like technology, for example, they want to know what the rules are up front, what your expected results are up front, what something like as simple as daily data deliveries look like and when an SLA is missed. All of that, it's important to have early involvement. I am in regular contact with my partners in the business. We're constantly talking to make sure that everyone's aware of changes that are coming and why, that they're clued into what that metric might look like, what rules might change, what those expected results are. They're really all at the table together. And then we clearly document what we expect at the end of this so that we can measure to it. We look at reports every month to see that performance is actually, in fact, doing what we want, and aligning to where we should. We document kind of a friction map or calendar that says, what's due at what point in time throughout that process. Um, and then all the way down to the front line, we share all of that through meetings, we train the teams, and then we also follow through with documented plan documents, policy documents, and quota documents. All of those are delivered, electronically, of course, to our sales folks. They have the chance to review and sign off.
Okay. So yeah, it's a really good balance. Excuse me, recognizing that different functions have to look after different things, and everyone has a role to play. I heard a lot of just transparency and being upfront about how things work, having a calendar, clarity. Um, so all of that makes a ton of sense. Do you find that as companies go through different phases, and this maybe I'm looking asking you to look at an example in earlier in your career when some things are going really good, some things are easier, when then things are not as good, or maybe they were not hitting sales targets, then it just gets a little bit tougher, and the tension kind of switches places. Um, and I find it interesting if you have an example or when you've seen that happen, and specifically any tips on how to resolve those. Let's say that the tension is unbalanced because of something is happening with a company that was not expected.
Sure. We actually have processes in place for something like that as well, which is like I said, a post-month review so that we can review and pivot very quickly to anything that's changing within the business. Um, Historically, I can think of a time with a comp plan change and the goals weren't necessarily aligned with the performance. And again, we fall back on those checkpoints, making sure that we're meeting up front. But when there's an aha moment, that we're catching it early in the month and communicating with sales, we know what's going on. We found this. We've identified X, Y, Z, and then reaching out to our partners in finance to ensure that we pivot as quickly as possible, even if that means that exact month we do an adjustment. Um, Obviously, we try not to, but that's part of the business, and you just
It's
have to
just in
make
the
sure it's
table is needed.
flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you're capturing the not only obviously that reporting around how commissions are being paid, but the performance of the plan compared to what was being tried to achieve at the beginning, right? So you set up a plan with some objectives, what is supposed to happen, and then you're also tracking that month by month,
Yes.
and really sounds like you have a playbook for detecting any things and jumping on the change right away. So you're not inventing a new process at the time it's established.
Right. Right. We do, and we follow it pretty much to a T every single month for that review process. We look at things mid-month. We look at day 1, which is the first of the following month, and then we have a final review again about 3, 4 days later.
Very cool. Love it. You have a very tight button-up ship, which is amazing. Um, Switching gears a little bit to the technology side of things. I know you've been through multiple tool transitions and consolidation efforts. What do you think is something that companies tend to underestimate in terms of how hard it is to do system modernization around compensation, whatever it may be, documentation requirements, anything about that sort of system change complexity you can share?
Yeah, you hit that perfectly. It's documented requirements, I would say, is the biggest miss. And easily done because you understand the intent of the plan, right? You know what you're trying to do. So you think that that equates to an actual requirement. But it doesn't. Saying something like payout is based on revenue. That's not a requirement. You have to really define what revenue is. What are the credits that go into that revenue? What's your data source? You have to really be clear on what might happen with discounts, the treatment of discounts, clawbacks, chargebacks, what happens with an exception or any kind of escalation. What makes a sale eligible for credit? You really have to be clear on, what the close, when is that close date? When is that credit worthy? Who owns the transaction? Maybe exclusions if you've got exclusions in your plan, those have to be called out. All of that needs to be in the requirements document early, because if you don't have those, you end up with more work down the road. A lot of rework.
Yeah, and I believe you probably alluded to this, but it's you have to involve people from other departments and teams
Yes.
early on as well, because requirements are obviously they're going to come into the comp system, but they're just taking in inputs from the whole company. And you might have seen this or not, but sometimes it's everyone is busy, everyone has their own priorities, other teams might have their own projects, so getting that attention and making sure you're getting that input early um, is key. So, if you have any tips or tricks to getting that input from other teams, that would be super helpful for us to hear.
Sure. As I mentioned, we are very closely aligned with technology partners, so I'm constantly working with them. We even have regular team meetings on a weekly cadence just to ensure that we are, you know, bonded and working towards the same mission. Sometimes we have to remind them what happens if something is missed. For example, data delivery is missed. We have to give a gentle nudge that there's somebody at the end of that with a paycheck waiting. But for the most part, we have those relationships built and the regular cadence of meetings and constant communication with the data teams, which is probably our strongest partnership we have just because of the need of the business.
So, it sounds like you've built strong relationships throughout, and now you're sort of capitalizing on that. So, maybe the takeaway for others earlier in the journey is just to start making sure you're building that foundation of trust and relationship, and don't wait till we have a big project with a ton of change to go across the hall and meet the people that might
Yes.
be able to help you get that done. Yeah,
Yeah, I would say your biggest partners, again, technology is probably top. You've got your finance, biz ops partners, and then obviously HR and legal. You want to have a quick connection over there as well so that you can reach out and make sure that you guys are aligned and that your mission is not counter to theirs, and that if you run into issues, you've got somebody that backs you. So
absolutely. So when done well and strategically, the comp function can be a huge driver for revenue, and it's just this often underutilized lever that companies really have to make things work. So, at what point does a commission team do the transition between just we're taking care of the admin stuff, nothing is breaking, into that next level of now we are a strategic partner, we have a seat at the table, and we're actually helping drive the growth of the company? Um,
yeah, I would say getting really good at storytelling and ensuring that you can kind of share what you're seeing. Key signs like reps hitting quota, but missing business, the business is missing revenue. You've got high volume of transactional activities, but yet your sales or your conversion rates might fall. Poorly distributed bell curves. You've got to make sure that your stakeholders understand that that's what you're looking at and why you're looking at those things. And I think that helps keep that seat at the table. Again, high payouts that don't align with your key performance indicators or scorecard metrics can be something because we tend to focus on, well, the payout was strong. So the performance might be strong, but that's where you can see that misalignment.
yeah, yeah, makes total sense. So there's nothing worse than seeing a team celebrate out here when other teams are falling behind, and that happens a lot with marketing teams and sales or just commissions or the company. So opposite can happen again when the company's making the number, but then just a few sellers are doing well, and that's really demoralizing. So catching it early and just having those reports built ahead of time. And then I guess don't put words in your mouth, but don't be afraid to raise the alarm when things are coming off. Just probably just be loud and be assertive about it.
Yeah, again, it goes back to having that seat at the table. Once you've built the trust, then you can be the loud partner that says, "Pay attention to this metric. It doesn't look right," and people will pay attention. So you absolutely have to be afraid to rock the boat a little bit and be loud.
Yeah, that's what leadership is about often. So excellent. Well, we have to talk about the AI aspect of things since otherwise we'd be not up with the trends. Obviously, a lot of stuff every week. It's whenever this gets published, things will have changed. So without having to be super topical in terms of what's the latest, maybe let's talk about your expectations. What do you think is realistic? Just choose whatever time frame you want. But how do you think AI can impact our business or comp policy escalation responses, maybe in the near term? And what do you see as just a further out in the horizon?
Obviously, near term, I think is going to be sort of small. Policy interpretation, escalation preparations, maybe dispute triage. You've got an agent or a rep who wants to question something, and we're actually looking into this right now. Could we create a bot that responds as opposed to my sales commission analysts who have to react to a lot of email and a lot of questions? So perhaps the AI could respond there. It's regurgitating policy. It's not making a recommendation to go outside of policy. It's staying within, really just interpreting the policy or the data or whatever. Um, Further down the line, I could see like scenario modeling. If I close this deal, what will it mean to me? What can I do? Kind of like a comp calculator, but more specific to that transaction. I think that would be helpful. Um, and then probably the most important thing is that we would ensure that there's some sort of validation process behind that. You don't have AI generating a payout, for example. It might generate a response to interpret the payout, but if again you have an exception or something that goes outside of the norm, that you've got, the usual checkpoints in place to confirm before anything is calculated and handed over. Um, a future state even beyond that, I could see it helping out with configuration. Plan configuration can always be difficult. We could also take a comp plan, upload it into AI, and have it help us with test cases and expected results. I think there's a lot of area there that we could, investigate.
Yeah, yeah, I like it a lot. I agree. The policy interpretation piece is at this point kind of low hanging fruit, but it's
Right.
super helpful,
Mhm.
and it's got the advantage of you being able to really narrow down the field of knowledge of the agent to just that one thing. So you're guaranteed they're not going to go off.
Right.
And let's face it, most people don't like reading policy. Many of them don't read it, and when they do, they don't understand most of it. And by definition, sometimes the language policy is written in is not the most non-lawyer friendly stuff out there. So it's a good way to do that for sure. Um, and yeah, if you can any inquiry that can be resolved by a bot instead of having a human to look at it for policy sounds
Right.
totally good.
Or
Yeah,
even triage it to the right agent. It might be a certain
sure.
type of policy question or whatever. So it could triage that and send it to the right agent who can respond quickly as opposed to, just putting it in a queue like we have today with a large team.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Then again, helping explain how the payouts happen a little bit harder, but it's doable. We're doing it at every stage, and it's really helpful to have that ability to help out. And I like where you're going in the longer term. Definitely modeling. It's already easier, but it should be easier to do it at scale. And yeah, testing. I've been playing around with some fake data generators that are out there that just produce amazing results for being able to have large amount of data that is that looks real but isn't. So you can just put it through the paces. Excellent. Do you have a dedicated person in your team that is sort of working with AI specifically, or is everyone sort of keeping up with the latest?
We have one who's got the highest focus. Yes. One of my managers has really grasped the AI tool and is doing everything she can to accelerate and kind of feed thoughts and trends to us so that we can try using in different use cases. So it is definitely the whole team, but like I said, the one is probably the strongest.
Yeah, yeah, that seems to happen quite a bit. It also depends on some companies are more, let's say, friendlier towards experimentation, and others. Then it depends a lot on the industry, and then obviously telecommunication is quite regulated, so it's probably less flexible than other industries to do trials. But yeah, there's a responsible way of doing it, which I'm sure you're following. Uh, and it was brings us to AI guardrails. And before we get into that, you mentioned something that I think is worth double clicking on. Yeah, commission calculations. There's really no need for AI to ever do that because they're deterministic. It's a formula. Things come in, things come out. There's no value for having any algorithm that you don't really understand how it works to do any of that. But I surprisingly more often than I think would still hear people suggesting and said, "Well, why would you want to do it? it's just a formula. You don't need to even if you could do it perfectly, just the energy constraints is completely silly, so
Correct, and then you're also having to, include maybe possibly, confidential data that you wouldn't wanna calculate in there.
of course.
There's
Yeah,
always a
another
caveat of error. So, yeah, the system is already built to structurally calculate. There's no need for additional.
yeah, one more reason not to do it, so thanks for that. Excellent. Alright, we're unfortunately coming sort of closer to the end of the time we have, uh, but we wanna know always ask our guests if there's any specific resources or books, communities, podcasts, anything that you would recommend for someone, again, that's trying to either break into the industry or scaling up their operations? Anything that's been useful to you would be great to hear.
Sure. Over the course of time, I've been involved with World at Work. Obviously, that site has a huge amount of just foundational comp knowledge. The books Compensating the Sales Force or the Sales Comp Handbook are both also helpful for the foundational knowledge. I stay current on podcasts like this one. There's a lot of live streams and webinars, and often they're hosted for free through some of our partners like Everstage. Really good for short, practical sessions. Um, I think personally it's helpful to have a key close contact with sales. I grew up in sales. I have a sales background, which helps me to have a just a foundational knowledge of what their interests are, what keeps them ticking. I think it helps with the language barrier that can
Sure.
often happen
Yeah.
from compensation and sales. So I always stress to my team that you stay close with your partners. It's not always just the content, it's about the connections that you've got somebody that you could reach out to and, ask their opinion or connect. And that's what a lot of these live streams and webinars do.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. World at Work, you're totally right. They put out amazing content. The certification is great. The live conferences, we've been to a few of those. Fantastic opportunity to network, meet people. And yeah, the classics, Compensating the Salesforce. I mean, it's a classic for a reason. Go read that for sure. Um, and yeah, again, double clicking on your comment around sales. I think it's important for the relationships, as you say, understanding the language, bridging the gap, but also each business has its own level of complexity that you really need to be very familiar with. And I know you in telco, we just did a webinar with telco recently. It's so complex, and there's so many things happening in the industry, and so many moving pieces that I think any comp professional that's not really in there with the sales team and even reading whatever trade publications are really at the forefront, you're gonna miss out on some nuance that is probably gonna come back to bite you at some point. So just stay curious, learn, stay close to the people that are living it every day, and it's only going to make your life easier and your job better and make you a better partner for the business.
I mean, as long as you can remember that the reason that you're here is because of those sales teams and they are your biggest customer. You're there so that they can earn their paycheck, pay their mortgage, take care of their families. They're not trying to get in the way. They're just trying to do the same things that we're all trying to do at the end of the day. And you're kind of a tool to help them do that. So keeping that relationship open is strong.
Very good. Well, we have a last question. I feel greedy because you've dropped a lot of advice along the way, but if you have anything else, so three key pieces of advice you'd like to share with our listeners that aspire to excel in compensation operations and systems modernization.
Um, Again, getting obsessed with definitions, documentation, understanding, because that's such important clarity. It helps avoid disputes. It helps people understand what their treatment will be. Um, Building relationships across the business. I think I've covered that one quite a bit today, but it's key. And then treating comp like it's a strategic function as opposed to like a back office uh, team. You're in. You've got a seat at the table, and you should respect that. That's what you're there for, is to make sure that you're accountable to the business. I would say if I could add a fourth, it's surround yourself with a strong team. My team, they're all experts at what they do, and they can only make what I do easier.
Totally. No, no, makes a ton of sense. And you covered data as well, right? Foundational, get your data right, which is a forever job. Like there's no one point in time where you're done with your data. It's a constant battle. Um, but
Yeah.
totally.
You're
worth it.
constantly auditing that data. We look at our data every day just to ensure that it's accurate, that we're getting it,
Yeah,
So
excellent.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been super helpful. I really appreciate your time and your insights. And yeah, you've been around doing this and doing an amazing job at it in a really tough position with a lot of pace and a super high accuracy. So that's for sure commendable. So congrats and keep up the good work. And thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this insightful episode of Go to Masters. Big thanks to Melissa for sharing her experiences and valuable insights. And remember, you can tune in every week to learn more from game changers driving hypergrowth companies across the globe. Go to Masters is brought to you by Everstage, your trusted partner for transforming the way businesses handle sales compensation. I'm Jose Aleman, your host, signing off for today. Thank you.